So our next speaker will be presenting on what he learned from the beings growing in his own backyard. So Dr. Eric Severson is an associate teaching professor of philosophy and strives to practice inclusive pediology, often focusing on racial justice, environmental ethics, and the philosophy of technology. Dr. Severson will be exploring how the typical vocabulary used to discuss weeds uses common language of war and colonialism, and how various indigenous metaphors for weeds can support a shift towards a non-settler phenomenology, got the word, for non-native plants. So Dr. Severson, please take it away.
Yeah, I'm ready. So what is a weed? The definitions are debatable, but there's no doubt that weeds are entangled with a titanic global industry. The metaphors utilized in weed control are unabashedly violent and militant, borrowing from language common to war and genocide. Terms like eradication, decimation, purity, and domination are repeated in order to entice consumers to purchase weed control chemicals and then look the other way as the farming industry buys them by tankerful. The brand leader Roundup is literally named for the practice of circling up enemies for mass elimination. Roundup reinforces this metaphor with Wild West imagery in their advertisements, the zing of flying bullets and gardeners imitating gunslingers. The signature ingredient in many versions of Roundup product is glyphosate, a broad spectrum systemic herbicide and the most widely used weed killer on the planet. It's chemical implicated also in a wide range of health and environmental problems. We are coached to battle weeds and therefore justify all costs in this war. My Earth Talk is a quick summary of research into thinking differently about our relationships with weeds. I seek alternatives through non-colonial philosophies of weeds, and I draw from global indigenous metaphors for non-native plants. My work as an ethicist and a philosopher developed alongside my love for this land in Seattle, where I was born and raised, and a sense of responsibility that I carry for all my living neighbors. As an expression of this, in 2012, my extended family purchased a dumped-on, weed-covered plot of land in Kenmore, Washington. The 6 acres includes ponds, wetlands, and streams, and was subject to massive episodes of dumping by a 20th century developer named Larry, who deposited hundreds of yards of inorganic soil, concrete, I only did his first name there, asphalt, rubble, and an entire shell gas station, metal gas station. In addition to the dumping episodes, it's also been used for decades as a neighborhood disposal site. When some students came to plant trees last fall, we found an entire door of a 1970s sedan. So if you're driving around in a car that's missing a rusty red door, let me know. Let's go back to the weed picture. The dense inorganic soil and rubble was a poor match for native flora, so the seeds of regional plants did not take root. Instead, Himalayan blackberry, Japanese knotweed, bindweed, English ivy, and at least a dozen other species of weeds covered the acres of property. So although the land has been mostly untouched for 40 years, forest succession has stagnated and the land has not contributed as it could to the overall ecology of our neighborhood. When we built 4 relatively eco-friendly homes on a corner of the property, the city required that we remove about an acre of weeds, and they recommended the use of Roundup. The product destroys weeds almost immediately, but it has some disturbing impacts on native plants, the bodies of animals, and even the people who spray the stuff. I was reluctant to use it, troubled by the rhetoric, and so I continued to seek other methods and philosophical approaches to weeds. Monsanto, who makes Roundup, exploits a massive loophole in environmental science. All connections must be doubted until they have been abundantly proven in the lab and in courts of law. This buys time to sustain a huge profit margin on the chemical, and in the latest development, switch out glyphosate for alternative chemicals that have not yet been as widely tested. Meanwhile, harm abounds. I'm a philosopher, so I went looking for tools to rethink our relations with weeds, and I found a beautiful article about the attitudes towards weeds among Australian elders. These Aboriginal elders speak about weeds through passive, neutral language and prefer metaphors for weed managements that focus on health, care, and creation. They often refer to the weeds as cheeky. Weeds tend to overrun their boundaries. They squeeze out native plants. They cause harm if untended. The way these elders speak about weeds shapes the way they manage them and the way they attend to the entangled relationships these plants have to the incredibly complex environments in which they grow. If I clear a section of blackberry with Roundup, what happens? Weed root systems hold soil in place, generate organic topsoil, provide cover and food for local animals, and otherwise volunteer to inhabit and care for a land that has been disturbed. One need not dispute the fact that such species are problematic to respect and honor the work that they do for disturbed landscapes. My one action you can take is simple. I invite you to think and speak differently when it comes to weeds. Different thinking leads to different interventions. Weeds are a common problem the world over. They can be managed in a way that leads to life or reinforces cycles of erosion, habitat loss, pollution, and harm. When we think of weeds as cheeky instead of subjects to genocidal rhetoric, we relate differently to the shared world in which these plants are entangled. Perhaps our interventions could be inspired by responsibility, involve some grief and caution, and then contain an expansive vision for the way all living things are connected, even the neighbors that tend to be more than a little bit cheeky.
Thank you, Dr. Severson, for your presentation. It's really important that we understand the use of language, even if it seems harmless, does have a big impact on how we view multiple things. So I really learned a lot from your presentations. Thank you.